I sat for my sister's house the summer she took the kids to her ex-husband's people in Thessaloniki. That's the setup. No mystery to it. She needed someone in the house because the insurance wouldn't cover an empty property for 6 weeks, and I needed somewhere to stay because my flatmate and I had stopped being able to share a kitchen without one of us leaving the room when the other walked in. Bad lease situation, the kind where both names are on it, and nobody's moving out first because that means you lose. So when Priya asked if I'd house sit from mid-June through the end of July, I said yes before she finished the sentence. Her place is a mid-terrace in Swindon, not the Old Town part, not the railway village bit that gets photographed sometimes, just a normal street off the Drove. 2 up, 2 down with a loft conversion and a paved back garden. There's a co-op you can see from the front bedroom window. You can hear the self-checkout machines if the wind's right and someone's left the door propped open, which in summer they always have. I'm saying this because it matters. It matters that this was not a remote place. There was a streetlight directly outside. There were neighbors on both walls. I could hear the couple on the left watching television most nights, and the retired man on the right had a dog that clicked its nails on the kitchen linoleum at 5 every morning. I was surrounded. That's the thing I keep coming back to. Priya walked me through the house the afternoon before her flight. She'd written a list. She's a list person. Always has been, ever since we were kids. Our mom used to say Priya would make a list of her lists if you gave her enough paper. So there were 4 pages, laminated, stuck to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a cartoon lobster that one of the kids had picked out at a seaside shop. Most of it was normal. Bins go out Tuesday night. The boiler makes a sound like a hammer, but it's fine. The engineers checked it. Don't use the upstairs shower because the seal's going and it leaks into the kitchen. Water the tomatoes in the back garden every other day, unless it rains. If the smoke detector in the hallway goes off for no reason, just fan it with a tea towel. It's sensitive to steam from the kettle. Normal things. I read through the list while she pointed at various cupboards and switches and said things like, "This one sticks," and "Jiggle it, don't force it." Then at the bottom of the second page, in the same handwriting, same blue pen, she'd written, "Don't answer the back door after dark." I almost didn't notice it because it sat between "Recycling is the blue bin, not the black one," and "The TV remote needs new batteries. There are spares in the junk drawer." It was just another item on the list. I did notice it, though, and I asked her about it. She was putting her phone charger into her carry-on, and she didn't look up. She said there'd been some trouble on the street earlier in the year. Some kids, she said, knocking on back doors and running away. She said it had spooked her at first, and now she just ignored it, and they'd mostly stopped. She said, "Don't engage and they'll get bored." I said, "Okay." She said it again, though. At the door, when the taxi was already running, she turned around and said, "Seriously, Jai, the back door. Don't open it after dark. Not even if it sounds like something's wrong. They do sound." She said that word, sounds, not noises, sounds. And then she hugged me and got in the taxi, and I watched it go up the road and turn left. And that was it. I should tell you about myself so this makes sense. I was 26. I was between things. I'd been doing warehouse work through an agency, and it had dried up. I wasn't in a crisis or anything. I had savings. I had a plan loosely. I was going to apply for a civil service fast stream intake in the autumn. I was reading for it. I had a stack of books about policy and governance that I carried from the flat in a canvas bag and set up on Priya's kitchen table like a small barricade. I'm not a nervous person. I don't have anxiety in the clinical sense. I don't see things. I don't hear things. I'm telling you this because I need you to understand that what happened was not a product of me being in a fragile state. I was fine. I was maybe the most fine I'd been in a year. I had a whole house to myself in the middle of a normal street in Swindon, and my biggest daily decision was whether to have toast or cereal, and that felt like an incredible luxury after 8 months of sharing a fridge with someone who labeled his eggs. The first week was unremarkable. I watered the tomatoes. I read. I cooked simple things and washed up immediately because Priya's kitchen was so clean it made you feel like a guest, even when you were alone. I watched television in the evenings. I called Priya twice. She sent photos of the kids at a beach. The weather in Swindon was hot and still, the kind of English June that always feels borrowed. I kept the windows open. I could hear lawnmowers, distant music, and the ice cream van that came through around 4 with its tinny little song. I slept well. I slept with the bedroom window open and the curtain moving and the streetlight painting a soft orange band across the ceiling, and I thought, this is easy. This is good. I could do this for a long time. I should say that in all of this first week, nothing knocked on the back door. The back door was a UPVC thing, white, with a frosted glass panel in the upper half. It opened onto the paved garden, which was enclosed by a wooden fence about 6 feet high. Beyond the fence on the left was the neighbor's matching garden. On the right, the other neighbor's. Directly behind was a narrow service lane that ran the length of the terrace block, just wide enough for the bins. You could access the lane from either end of the street. It wasn't gated. Anyone could walk down it. So the idea of kids running along it and banging on doors wasn't unusual. It wasn't unusual at all. That was what I told myself the first time. It was the 9th night, a Wednesday. I know because I'd just taken the bins out, which meant Tuesday had just passed, and I'd remembered to do it, which I was quietly pleased about. I was in the kitchen at about 10:30, making tea. The lights were on. The window above the sink was open. I could hear the couple next door's television through the shared wall, something with a laugh track, and I remember thinking it sounded like the laughter was coming from the garden, which it wasn't. It was just the way the sound carried through the open window. But for a second, I thought there were people laughing in the back garden, and my body reacted before my mind did. Just a little catch in the chest. The kind of flinch you get when you think you've missed a step on the stairs. And then someone knocked on the back door. 3 knocks. Not fast, not slow, evenly spaced. The kind of knock you'd use on a front door in the daytime. A polite knock. I stood there with the kettle in my hand and looked at the door, and my first thought was completely practical. I thought, it's 10:30. It's June. It's not fully dark yet. The sky through the frosted glass panel was that deep blue you get in midsummer when the sun's been down for an hour, but the light hasn't fully committed to leaving. So, technically it wasn't dark. Technically, I almost went to the door. I had my hand out, and I stopped because I heard Priya's voice in my head, not in a supernatural way, in the way you hear your sister's voice when she's told you to do something and you're about to not do it. Don't answer the back door after dark. I looked at the frosted glass. There was no shape behind it. Nobody is standing there, no silhouette. Just the blue of the sky and the dim forms of the garden furniture. I didn't open it. I went back to making tea. The knocking didn't come again. I went to bed and thought about it for maybe 3 minutes and fell asleep. And that was that. The next night, same time. Maybe a little later. I was reading at the kitchen table. 3 knocks, same tempo, same politeness. This time I didn't get up. I kept reading. After about a minute, I heard what I'd describe as a shuffling outside, the kind of sound a shoe makes on paving slabs, and then nothing. I listened for a while. I could hear the neighbor's dog resettling itself on the other side of the wall. Normal sounds. I finished my chapter and went to bed. The 3rd night, the knocking came earlier. I was still eating dinner. It was maybe 9:15, still daylight, proper daylight, sun not even fully set. 3 knocks, and because it was daylight, full daylight, I thought, this is ridiculous. If it's kids, I'll see them running away, and that'll be the end of it. If it's a neighbor, I should answer. It's 9 o'clock in broad daylight, and I'm a grown man not answering my own sister's back door. I got up. I walked to the door. I opened it. The garden was empty. Not empty in a surprising way, just empty. The paving slabs, the wooden fence, the tomato plants in their grow bags, the garden chairs that Priya's kids had left slightly askew. The gate at the back, which led to the service lane, was closed. I stepped outside. The air was warm and still and smelled like cut grass and someone's barbecue a few doors down. I walked to the gate and opened it and looked up and down the lane. A fox was sitting about 30 meters away, near someone's recycling box, looking at me with that flat urban fox expression that says I was here first. Nothing else. I went back inside, closed the door, and felt stupid. Not scared. Stupid. Like I'd let a laminated list make me behave like a child. I washed up my plate and didn't think about it again. That was the breach. I know that now. Not because I believe in rules in some supernatural sense, not because I think the list was a ward or a spell. I think what happened is simpler than that, and also worse. I think the door was being tested. I think the knocking was a question, and the question was, will this one open it? And I answered. Nothing happened for 5 days. That's the part I want you to understand. It wasn't immediate. There was no punishment that night, no escalation. 5 days of quiet. 5 days of reading and watering tomatoes and calling Priya and hearing about the kids eating lucumades and watching the same foxes move through the service lane at dusk. I stopped thinking about the knocking entirely. It had been kids, or it had been some acoustic quirk of the terrace block, or it had been nothing. I stopped thinking about it. On the 5th day, which was a Monday, I came downstairs at about 7 in the morning, and the back door was open. Not wide open, ajar, about 2 inches. I could feel the morning air coming through the gap, cool and slightly damp, the way it gets before a hot day. I stood at the bottom of the stairs and looked at it. I was certain I'd locked it the night before. Not just closed it, locked it. I lock doors. It's one of those things I do automatically, the way some people always check their pockets for their phone. I lock doors and I check them. I'd checked it the previous night. I was as sure of that as I was of anything. I walked over and examined the lock. It was a standard UPVC multi-point. The handle was in the up position, which meant it was unlocked. To unlock it from the inside, you push the handle down. To unlock it from the outside, you'd need a key. Priya had given me 2 keys. One was on my keyring in my pocket. The other was on a hook by the front door, where I could see it from where I was standing. Both keys accounted for. I closed the door. I locked it. I stood there for a while. Then I did something that I've since thought about a lot. I got a glass from the cupboard, and I filled it with water, and I put it on the floor about 6 inches from the back door, right in the path of where the door would swing if it opened. My thinking was simple. If the door opened in the night, the glass would fall and break, and I'd hear it. It was not a sophisticated measure, but it was a measure, and taking it made me feel like I was doing something rational, and that feeling was what I needed. That night, I slept badly for the first time, not because of fear, because of the heat. It was the start of what the news was calling a mini heat wave, 4 or 5 days of temperatures in the low 30s, and the upstairs of a mid-terrace house holds heat like an oven. I had the bedroom window open as wide as it would go, and I still woke up twice, sweating. Sheets stuck to me. Both times, I lay there and listened and heard nothing unusual. The second time, I got up and went to the bathroom for water, and on the way back, I stopped at the top of the stairs. I looked down. The hallway was dark except for the streetlight glow through the frosted glass of the front door. Everything was still. I went back to bed. In the morning, the glass was where I'd left it. The door was locked. I felt relieved and also slightly embarrassed, which is a combination that tells you something about how we process fear when nothing confirms it. You feel silly. You feel like you've been silly. And that feeling of silliness is its own kind of danger, because it makes you lower your guard, not out of courage, but out of embarrassment. I left the glass there anyway. 3 nights later, Thursday, the hottest night of the stretch. I couldn't sleep at all. I was lying on top of the sheets in shorts and a t-shirt with a fan going that was just pushing warm air around in circles. At some point, I gave up and went downstairs. I was going to sit in the back garden. That was my plan. Take a chair outside and sit in the night air, which had to be cooler than the upstairs of that house. I went into the kitchen. The clock on the microwave said 1:47. I looked at the back door. The glass was where I'd left it. The door was closed. I unlocked it. I opened it carefully, stepping over the glass. I went outside. The garden was dark, but not black. There was ambient light from the streetlights that lined the road on the other side of the houses, and a faint glow from a bedroom window 2 doors down, where someone was still awake. I could see the tomato plants and the fence, and the garden furniture. I sat down in one of the chairs. The plastic was warm from the day's heat, but the air was noticeably cooler than inside. I sat there. I breathed. I listened to the nothing that a residential street produces at 2 in the morning, which is not actually nothing but a very specific texture of sound. The background hum of the road network a mile away, the tick of cooling metal from someone's car, a plane high up, a single bird that shouldn't have been singing but was. I sat there for maybe 20 minutes. I was thinking about my civil service application, about how to frame the personal statement. I was thinking about whether I'd call Priya in the morning. I was thinking about nothing. And then I heard the gate, the back gate, the one that opened onto the service lane. It was a wooden gate with a latch, and it made a specific sound when it opened, a scrape and a click, because the wood had swollen in the heat, and it dragged on the paving. I'd heard that sound every time I'd gone out to the bins. I knew it. I heard it now. I looked at the gate. I couldn't see it clearly because it was at the far end of the garden, maybe 4 meters from me, and it was in the shadow of the fence. But I could see that it was open. It had been closed when I came outside. I was sure of that. And now it was open, and there was nothing in the gateway. No person, no fox, just the dark gap of the lane beyond. I want to describe what I felt, because it's not what you think. I wasn't terrified. I was suddenly and completely awake, in a way I hadn't been for the 20 minutes I'd been sitting there. Every part of my body was receiving information. I could feel the plastic of the chair against the backs of my legs. I could feel the air on my arms. I could feel my own pulse in my wrists. I was not processing any of this information. I was just receiving it, like a microphone that's been turned on but isn't connected to anything that records. I stood up. I didn't do it quickly. I stood up the way you do when you're trying not to make a meeting awkward by leaving too fast. I took 2 steps backwards toward the house. I was watching the gate. The gate was open. The lane beyond was dark. I took another step. My heel caught the threshold of the back door, and I stumbled slightly and caught myself on the doorframe, stepped inside and closed the door and locked it. I stood in the kitchen with the lights off. I don't know why I didn't turn them on. Some part of me didn't want to be visible. I stood there and looked through the frosted glass panel. And of course, I couldn't see anything because frosted glass is specifically designed to prevent you from seeing anything, which I had never considered as a problem before, and which now felt like the most significant design flaw in the history of residential architecture. I stood there for a long time, 5 minutes, maybe more. Nothing knocked, nothing tried the door, nothing happened. I went upstairs. I did not sleep. In the morning, I went out to the garden in full daylight and checked the gate. It was closed. The latch was down. I opened it and looked into the lane. There was nothing there except the usual bins and recycling boxes and a deflated football that had been there since I arrived. I checked the ground for footprints, which was pointless because the lane was tarmacked and the garden was paved. There were no marks. There was no evidence of anything. I called Priya. I didn't tell her about the gate. I asked about the knocking. I said, "Those kids you mentioned, the ones who knock on back doors, has that happened recently?" She said not for months. She said it used to happen in February and March, and then it stopped. I said, okay. She asked if everything was all right, and I said yes, fine, just curious, because the neighbor mentioned it. I lied. The neighbor hadn't mentioned it. I don't know why I lied. I think I didn't want to worry her. I think I also didn't want to say out loud what I was feeling, because saying it out loud would have made it into a thing, and I didn't want it to be a thing. I wanted it to be nothing. That evening, I did something I haven't told anyone about until now. I set up a kind of surveillance. Priya had a baby monitor from when the kids were small, one of those with a camera and a screen. I found it in a box in the loft conversion. I charged it up. I put the camera on the kitchen windowsill, angled so it was looking out through the glass toward the back garden. I took the screen upstairs and put on the bedside table. The image was small and grainy and had that green-tinged night vision look. But I could see the garden. I could see the fence. I could see the gate. I watched it for an hour before I fell asleep. Nothing moved. At 3:11 in the morning, I woke up because I heard a sound. It was not knocking. It was the sound of the baby monitor itself, that low, static hiss that the microphone picks up when there's nothing to hear. Except it wasn't quite static. There was something underneath it, a rhythm. Not a mechanical rhythm, not a pattern, an organic rhythm, like breathing, except I want to be careful here because I know what that sounds like. And I know the first thing you'll think is that it was the microphone picking up ambient noise, or its own feedback, or the wind through the garden. I thought all of those things too. I lay there, and I thought all of those things, and I kept listening, and it kept going. I picked up the monitor screen and looked at the image. The garden was dark. The night vision showed the same shapes: fence, paving, plants, furniture. The gate was closed. I could see the gate. It was closed. Then the image shifted. Not the camera. The camera was on the kitchen windowsill, inside, stable. The image didn't shift because the camera moved. It shifted because something moved between the camera and the garden. Something passed in front of the kitchen window on the outside. The image went dark for a moment and then came back, like someone had walked past. I didn't get up. I want to be honest about that. I didn't get up. I lay in bed with the monitor in my hands, and I watched the screen, and I waited. The breathing sound, or whatever it was, continued for another few minutes. Then it stopped. The image remained stable. Nothing else moved. I lay there until morning. When I went downstairs, the glass of water was still in front of the back door. The door was locked. The kitchen was exactly as I'd left it. The camera was still on the windowsill. I picked it up and looked at the outside of the kitchen window from the garden. There were no smudges, no handprints, no marks of any kind. The window was clean. Priya kept a clean house. I want to stop here and tell you what I was thinking, because I know from the outside this looks like the part where the person in the story should leave. Just go. Get in the car, drive back to the flat with the labeled eggs, sleep on the sofa, tell Priya the boiler broke, and you got spooked. But I wasn't thinking about leaving. I was thinking about explanations. I was running through every rational possibility with the kind of energy that, looking back, was itself a sign of how frightened I actually was. People who aren't scared don't spend 3 hours constructing elaborate theories about wind patterns and acoustic resonance in terrace housing. People who aren't scared just shrug and move on. I was not shrugging. I was building a case for normalcy with the dedication of a man whose freedom depends on the verdict. 2 days passed. Nothing happened. The glass stayed upright. The door stayed locked. The monitor showed nothing but the green dark garden and the closed gate. I started to feel the embarrassment again. I thought about putting the baby monitor back in the loft. I didn't, but I thought about it. On Saturday night, I went to the pub. Not a decision that seems relevant, but it is. I went to the local, about a 10-minute walk, and I sat at the bar, had 2 pints, watched whatever football was on the screen, and didn't talk to anyone except the bartender, who asked if I was new to the area, and I said I was house sitting for my sister. He asked where. I told him the street. He said, "Nice street? Quiet." I said, "Yeah." I came home at about 11, let myself in the front door, locked it behind me, and walked through to the kitchen. The glass was on its side. There was water on the floor. The back door was open. Not ajar this time. Open. All the way open. The garden was dark beyond it, and standing in the garden, about 2 meters from the door, was a woman. I could see her clearly because the light from the kitchen was falling through the open door onto the paving, and she was standing just at the edge of it. She was wearing a dark coat, something long and shapeless. Her hair was dark. She was facing me. She was not moving. I did not move either. I stood in the kitchen, and she stood in the garden, and we looked at each other. I could not see her face clearly. The light was behind me, falling forward, and it lit the front of her body. But her face was in that awkward zone where the light was hitting her chin and neck, but not reaching her eyes and forehead. I could see the shape of her face. I could see that she was looking at me. I could not see her expression. I said, "Hello?" She didn't respond. I said, "Can I help you?" She moved. She took one step forward, not toward the door, to the side. A lateral step, like someone adjusting their position in a queue. And then she stopped again. I said, "You need to leave. This is private property." She took another step. Same direction. She was moving along the edge of the light, staying at the border of it, not coming closer, not retreating, just shifting sideways. I reached for the light switch by the back door, the exterior light, the one Priya had installed above the door for when she was out with the bins in winter. I flicked it on. The garden flooded with white light. The woman was gone, not running away, not retreating into shadow. Gone. The garden was empty. The gate was closed. The fence was unbroken. There was nowhere she could have gone in the fraction of a second between the light coming on and my eyes adjusting. Nowhere. I closed the door. I locked it. I mopped up the water. I put the glass back. I went upstairs and watched the baby monitor until dawn and saw nothing. I should have called someone. The police, a neighbor, Priya. I called no one. I think about that a lot. Why I didn't call anyone. The closest I can come to an explanation is this. I didn't believe what I'd seen. Not in the way of someone in denial, in a more fundamental way. The woman in the garden didn't fit inside my understanding of how things work, so my brain refused to file it. It just sat there, unprocessed, like a document in a language you can't read. You know it says something. You can't make yourself know what. The next day was Sunday. I spent it inside. I didn't go into the garden. I didn't open the back door. I read. I made food. I watched the monitor intermittently. In the afternoon, I fell asleep on the sofa and woke up at 6, and for a moment didn't know where I was. And that disorientation lasted longer than it should have, maybe 10 seconds, during which I had the very clear thought, I am in the wrong house. I knew I wasn't. I was in Priya's house. I recognized everything. But the thought didn't come from the part of my brain that processes visual information. It came from somewhere else. Somewhere that doesn't check the furniture and the walls and the carpet. Somewhere that just knows. And what it knew for 10 seconds was that this was not the right place. That night, I went to bed early. I took the baby monitor. I lay in the dark and watched the screen. And at 2:20 in the morning, I saw the gate open. It opened slowly. The way a gate opens when someone pushes it carefully and deliberately, not wanting it to scrape. I watched it swing inward, all the way, until it was flat against the fence. Then, nothing. The gateway stood open. The lane beyond it was dark. Nothing came through. I watched for 40 minutes. My eyes ached from the small screen. Nothing came through the gate. But it stayed open. It stayed open like it was waiting. At 3:05, the kitchen light turned on. I was upstairs. The light switch was downstairs. I was looking at the baby monitor, and the image changed because the kitchen light came on, and suddenly the camera was showing a brightly lit kitchen instead of a dark garden. The reflection in the window glass, turning the image into a picture of the room rather than what lay beyond it. I could see the kitchen table. I could see my books. I could see the back of a chair. I could see, reflected in the window, someone standing in the kitchen. The image was blurry. The camera wasn't designed for this. It was designed to show a baby in a cot, not a reflection in a window at distance. But I could see a figure, dark, still, standing near the back door, facing into the room, facing toward the hallway. Facing, I understood with a slowness that I can only describe as merciful, toward the stairs that led up to where I was lying. I turned the monitor off. I don't know why I did that. It was the wrong thing to do. It was the equivalent of pulling the covers over your head. But I did it. I turned it off, and I lay in the dark, and I listened. The house was quiet. Then I heard the stairs. Not footsteps exactly. The stairs in Priya's house creak. Every terraced house of that age has stairs that creak. I knew which ones. The third from the bottom creaks. The seventh creaks. The top one creaks. I heard the third from the bottom. Then a pause. Then the seventh. Then a longer pause. Then nothing. I was lying in bed in the dark, and something was on the stairs between the seventh step and the landing, and it had stopped. I didn't breathe. I'm not being dramatic. I physically could not get my body to breathe. My chest was locked. My whole body was locked. I was lying on my back staring at the ceiling where the streetlight made its orange band, and I could not move. The landing creaks too. One spot, right outside the bathroom door. I knew the sound. I'd heard it every time I walked to the bathroom in the night. I'd heard it so many times that I'd stopped hearing it, the way you stop hearing a clock. I heard it now. Something was on the landing. Something was on the landing outside the bedroom door, which I had not closed, because I never closed it, because it was summer, and the house was hot, and closing the door made the room unbearable. I lay there, and I thought about Priya's list. I thought about the words at the bottom of the second page. Don't answer the back door after dark. And I thought, I opened it. I opened it in daylight, and I thought that made it different, but it didn't make it different. The rule wasn't about darkness. The rule was about the door. Nothing came into the room. I lay there for what felt like hours, and nothing came into the room. I heard no more sounds. At some point, the paralysis in my body broke, and I took a breath that sounded like a gasp, and I turned my head toward the door, and the landing beyond it was dark and empty, and there was nothing there. I didn't sleep. I lay there until the light came in through the window, and I could hear the neighbor's dog clicking on the lino, and a car starting up the street, and the world reassembling itself into the thing it's supposed to be. Then I got up. The kitchen light was off. The back door was locked. The glass was upright. The gate, when I checked from the upstairs window, was closed. Everything was exactly as it should be. Everything was always exactly as it should be. I called Priya. I told her I'd had a stomach bug and was thinking about going back to the flat for a couple of days. She said that was fine. She'd ask her friend Mo to check on the house. I said okay. She said, "You sure you're all right?" I said yes. She said, "You sound weird." I said it was just the bug. I packed my bag. I put the baby monitor back in the loft. I watered the tomatoes because I'd said I would. I stood in the back garden in the full morning sun and looked at the gate and the fence and the paving. And there was nothing wrong with any of it. A blackbird was sitting on the fence. The neighbor was hanging washing. I could hear a radio. I could hear children somewhere. I left. I drove back to the flat. My flatmate was out. I sat on my bed in my room with the labeled eggs in the fridge and the bad lease and the life I'd been so happy to leave 3 weeks earlier, and I felt a kind of relief so intense that it was almost nausea. I didn't go back. Mo checked the house. Priya came home on schedule at the end of July, and I met her at the house and helped her carry the bags in, and the kids were brown and happy, and the house was fine. Everything was fine. I didn't tell her what happened. I watched her lock the back door that evening with the same automatic gesture I use, the way you check without thinking, and I thought about asking her. I thought about saying, "Priya, what's actually at the back door?" But the kids were there, and the house was full, and it was light, and the moment passed. 3 weeks later, she called me. Normal call, normal chat, and at the end, she said, "Oh, the weirdest thing. You know the lady next door, Mrs. Adiemi, on the left?" I said I didn't know her, but I knew the house, the one where I could hear the television through the wall. Priya said Mrs. Adiemi had been asking around the street about her mother. Her mother had been staying with her. Elderly woman, some mobility issues. She'd gone out to the back garden one night in the heat because she couldn't sleep, and she wasn't in the garden in the morning. She wasn't anywhere. The back gate was open. She wasn't in the lane. She wasn't at any of the neighbors. She wasn't at the hospital or the police station. She was just gone. Priya told me this the way you tell someone a strange piece of neighborhood news. She wasn't connecting it to anything. Why would she? I said that's awful. I hope they find her. Priya said yes. She hoped so too. They didn't find her. I checked. I kept checking. I still check. She's still missing. An elderly woman who went out to her back garden in the middle of a hot night and was not there in the morning. I think about the woman I saw, standing at the edge of the light. I think about the dark coat. I think about the height of her and the shape of her. I think about how I couldn't see her face. I think about how she didn't answer when I spoke. I think about whether she was trying to come in or trying to tell me not to come out. I think about the knocking. 3 knocks. A polite knock. The kind of knock that an elderly woman with manners would use. I think about the door. I didn't tell Priya. I haven't told Priya. There's nothing to tell that would help. There's nothing I know. There's nothing I saw that I can put into a sentence and hand to a police officer and say, "This is what happened. I saw a woman in a garden. I heard stairs creak. I felt afraid." That's not evidence. That's not even a story, really. But I think about the list. I think about the laminated pages on the fridge. I think about the way Priya wrote that rule in the same blue pen, in the same careful handwriting, between the recycling schedule and the batteries for the remote. Like it belonged there. Like it was the same kind of information. And I think she knows. I think she knows more than she told me. I think the reason the list is laminated is because it's permanent. And I think the reason she never explained the rule is the same reason I'm not explaining this to you. Not really, because there's nothing to explain. There's nothing to explain. There's a door, and after dark, you don't open it, and that's all. That's all. I live in the flat again. My flatmate moved out eventually. I got a new one. She's fine. Normal. Doesn't label things. I got onto the fast stream intake, and I work in Whitehall now. Normal life. Good life, actually. Better than the one I had before that summer. But I don't house sit anymore, and I check my back door every night. I check it twice. I check the lock, and then I check it again. My new flatmate asked me about it once, said I seemed very careful about doors, and I said I'd been broken into once when I was younger, which isn't true. But it's an explanation that makes sense. It's an explanation that fits inside the world as she understands it. Some explanations are like that. They're not true. They're just the right shape.